What's going on, everybody? How's everybody doing tonight out there in YouTube land? It's Wrestling Memories Night. How's everybody doing? Like I said, I'm having an issue here, Heather.
What's up?
How come? Oops. Ronnie's not popping up on my screen here at all. It's like not popping up.
My YouTube's not in the buffer.
It's green on my end. I don't know why my. Oh, I might know why. Did you capture anything on this? That's why.
It was already set. I shouldn't have had to.
Well,
And I had it set.
do you want to take care of that real quick? So hold on a second, guys. We're gonna go. We're gonna do this live. We got to fix something real quick. But anyway, we're gonna be talking about WrestleMania 20. We're gonna talk about the match between Chris Benoit. This is Ronnie's favorite match. Chris Benoit, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels. Listen to the parallels of this story with the women's triple threat. Because they probably could have stolen from this story on how Shawn Michaels got into the fucking match. And it would have made more fucking sense, and they would have been able to tell the fucking story. So when you're listening to what Ronnie's going to talk about, because she's going to talk about this, listen to how they tell this story. And my God, if you can just imagine what they could have done with the story. Because Chris Benoit was the hottest thing in fucking WWE at the time. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put him in the match that he was in. So he was the hottest thing at the time. Therefore, Vince didn't think that he was the main event material, but he was the hottest thing going. It's a lot like Becky Lynch to me. Vince McMahon doesn't think she's the main event, so he put Charlotte in that match to give it a little bit more pizzazz. It failed, ultimately, but that being said, I'm going to have Heather come over here and see if she can fix this. I don't know what the issue is, but we'll get it fixed. But Ronnie, you can go ahead and start talking, and we'll get you up and running here.
Yeah, like this was one of my ultimate wrestling matches that I enjoyed from how it was. It also involved wrestlers that I followed their careers. So all be in a match together and it felt, which kind of made it intriguing to how it all came about. So Chris Benoit in 2004, and at that time he was on the SmackDown brand, and Shawn Michaels. The thing that intrigued me while starting the match, he was the first friend, and Steve Austin, who was general manager, then on the law and kind of just made things flow by the rules of the book. When you win the Rumble match, you're the one that gets the pick. And he said, based on the match between Triple H and Shawn Michaels, yes, Shawn Michaels did deserve another chance. However, he was not the Royal Rumble winner. Chris Benoit's music hits. And down to ringside, they're basically looking in awe because with him being on SmackDown, how was he going to face possibly it was Triple H or who he was going to face, whoever the champion was at SmackDown at WrestleMania. There was a loophole that he figured out that it basically said that he was able to pick a champion. You would face a champion at WrestleMania. It didn't specify which. So Benoit was having issues over on SmackDown with the general manager at the time. It was Paul Heyman. And Paul Heyman was putting him through the ringer over there with different matches and just different scenarios and promos and not pushing him, which Benoit wanted. So he shows up, he's in the ring, he makes the statement that with him being the Rumble winner, that he wants a shot at Triple H. So based on that and that loophole, they went ahead and Vince McMahon that week as well, when he appeared on SmackDown, confronted Paul Heyman, basically saying, hey, you're the one that calls this. We've got no control over it now. We've lost Benoit. He's now over on Raw because of this loophole, and he was the Rumble winner, so he's now going to choose Triple H to go against at WrestleMania.
Okay.
So, with everything so far, the Rumble match win, how he did it, just the intricacy that they used with, he found this loophole that basically says, okay, I can choose who I want and this is what I want to do. It was kind of like the start of with the choosing of which champion you wanted to fight. And on Raw's show, the general manager at that time was Eric Bischoff.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of had to, with all legalities and stuff, they went with the storyline. Okay, this is the reason we're going to have the match between, at this point, it was going to be Chris Benoit, Royal Rumble winner 2004, versus, at that point in time, Triple H, who had retained his belt over Shawn Michaels in the last man standing match.
Right.
So the following week on Raw, you had a situation where Chris Jericho had his highlight reel show. And of course, he had Chris Benoit come out on it and back and forth talking about him winning and what he's striving for. And they showed a backstage clip of Ric Flair and Chris Benoit having some words. And Ric Flair does come out. And basically the wording that was used from Ric Flair and knowing their history from WCW days and coming into WWE, that Chris Benoit was always considered a runner-up. He was not worthy of the brass ring comments. He always fell short. And I felt it was kind of ironic with him telling this to Chris Benoit because he was worthy enough to be a four horseman, though, in WCW. And then to have him over here on Raw, making him
like second fiddle or not worthy of title contentionship because he was on the show with all the big names and all the big stars now being flipped over to Raw. So they had words in not actually a confrontation, but Chris Benoit says, well, if you don't think I'm worthy enough, why don't you have a match with me tonight? Which of course did not happen. He ended up fighting Mark Henry that night. But what would actually transpire, though, is in the upcoming weeks to WrestleMania, Chris Benoit was kind of put in matches with Evolution members such as Ric Flair, such as Batista, Randy Orton. And it was basically to kind of show, are you worthy enough for this match? Can you hang with the likes of us? And Triple H, on the other hand, was trying to get an answer from Eric Bischoff because the week after that, there was the contract signing that was supposed to occur. And it wasn't anything flamboyant. They had like a wooden table in the ring. And Triple H was out there. Benoit was out there. And Shawn Michaels interferes during the contract signing. And with words being exchanged, Michaels ends up sweet chin musicking Benoit and actually signs the contract in Benoit's spot. So now we have another legal issue that, along with Benoit earning the title, not able to sign the contract because Shawn Michaels signed it, and Triple H kind of standing on the wayside like, okay, who am I actually fighting? And back and forth with Eric Bischoff, the GM at the time, of what's going to happen. Right. So they went into more with the legal aspects of it with, well, Michael signed the contract, Benoit didn't, and there was an actual match where Triple H was in the ring with Chris Benoit, and Evolution comes out to help him. And Chris Benoit that night had a match against Shawn Michaels where Triple H appears. So during all the chaotic situations going on in the match with Triple H appearing, coming out, still trying to figure out, okay, am I fighting Michaels? Am I fighting Benoit? Who's it going to be? Stone Cold comes out. And of course, he just plays it off, riding around on his little quad around the ring, looking at Michaels, looking at Benoit. He rides up on the ramp, and there's where Triple H is standing, and basically tells him Eric Bischoff has made a decision, and that Triple H would defend his title. It would be the first ever that they had a main event of a triple threat at WrestleMania 20. And it would be versus Benoit versus Mike. So storyline wise, Triple H is fuming. Benoit's looking at Michaels. Michaels is looking at Benoit. Everybody's yelling, screaming in the crowd. So there was a couple more weeks before WrestleMania, and that's where they kind of just did more of the promos back and forth. Chris Benoit facing the Evolution members. But the one match prior to that is they had a tag team match. And in the tag team match, they had Batista and Orton versus Shawn Michaels and Chris Benoit. And there was some animosity going on in the ring. Michaels and Benoit back and forth, trying to pin, the other one trying to pin. And at the end of that match, Michaels and Michaels and Benoit start fighting after the match is over. And Orton at that point had pinned Shawn Michaels. So Triple H comes out along with Ric Flair. All the Evolution members are beating up on Shawn Michaels and Chris Benoit. And that's how that show led into the week, which we call the go-home shows, or prior to WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm.
Benoit was in a match in the ring, and at the end of it, Shawn Michaels comes out, basically trying to make a pact with Benoit to defeat Triple H, that they would team together and one or the other of them would basically take the belt at WrestleMania. Well, Triple H, of course, comes out and during the promo basically said he didn't really need anything other than their egos, which was going to cost them their wins. Their egos at this point were bigger than the match itself. It was going to cost them either way. And it basically cuts off at the end with, of course, you got Shawn Michaels looking at Chris Benoit looking at Shawn Michaels, and Triple H staring down on him with the belt. So storyline-wise, it progressed along from the Royal Rumble with how they got Chris Benoit originally winning, going into the match to face Triple H, and then how they intricated the storyline, putting Shawn Michaels into it because of the legalities of the contract signing and the animosity between Shawn Michaels and Triple H because of the draw of the last man standing.
Right.
It incorporated the Evolution guys because Chris Benoit was basically having to face them week after week after week, and you always had Evolution ganging up on him at the end of a match or interfering. You had the promos between them all. And to me, it flowed from how a storyline should go up until you get to, of course, WrestleMania 20, and then the match happening, which also I found out when I was doing my research that this was considered, and I think I did mention it, it was the first triple threat match, and it was the first time that the heavyweight title was in the main event of that WrestleMania, but also it was the last WrestleMania at Madison Square Garden.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot played in with that too, with this being kind of like the first time ever, and with these three guys, Chris Benoit and Triple H did have somewhat of a history, but he had never been in the ring at that point with Shawn Michaels, where Triple H and Shawn Michaels had that chemistry in the ring with fighting in their feud. So for me, just watching all these guys come up and then finally facing each other, but having all three of them face each other, just made it an interesting and intriguing match for me, which is why I enjoyed it, and then along with the outcome.
Okay. With the feud, again, it's all about the feuds with me. As long as they're able to tell a really good story and have a good match, it don't bother me. Now, this was the beginning of WWE and their infinite wisdom, having multi-person matches and getting everybody on the card at WrestleMania. This was organic. I mean, am I stepping out of line by saying if they would have, and I understand that Charlotte should, Vince just threw her in the match just to throw her in the match because that's what Vince thinks. Vince thinks Charlotte, and I can't disagree with him. Vince thinks Charlotte is the top guy on the women's side. So he throws her into that match. They could have told a better story with that. With
their
Charlotte,
storyline was Becky was suspended. So with
right.
her being suspended through WrestleMania,
right.
who was on to face?
Right, but they didn't need to suspend Becky Lynch. And this is where the story just went stupid on me.
Right.
For me. This is where the story went stupid. They could have, and there's nothing wrong with rehashing the story as long as you tell it a different way. And they were going to tell it a different way by God, having the heel be Shawn Michaels. Because, I mean, look at it. Shawn Michaels was Vince's guy, along with Triple H. Chris Benoit was not. So you look at Triple H, Ronda Rousey, Shawn Michaels, Charlotte, Chris Benoit, Becky Lynch. If you can't see the comparisons there and the parallels, boy, you're missing out on something. Now, the story was really good for me personally, and I'm going to say this now. The match was, And I know that you have in your notes here, it was place number 2 on IGN's top 20 matches in WrestleMania history. When was that pulled?
Let's see when that was. Because I've seen it as high as 11 and 17.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it number 2 because it didn't transcend the business. It's a great match. If you're just looking at match, yeah, sure, it's number 2. Could be. You could argue it could be. But I wouldn't say it was the number 2 of all time best matches in WrestleMania history. That's I wouldn't say that. It's up there. It's top 20 maybe. But I'm sure that you've heard our, if you go back and watch Derailed, I've talked about my favorite match of all time, which should be number 1 in everybody's book. Subjective. If you liked that kind of wrestling that transcended the business, don't get fucking excited to say you're dictating again, JP. I'm not dictating shit. You can't tell me that match did nothing for you. That match between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret Hart. That match did nothing to transcend the business. In fact, it took it to the next level. In fact, I'll go one further and say that match started the Attitude Era. But that being said, I wasn't too big into triple threat. I'm not really too big into multi-person matches. But that's just my preference. Now, was it a great combination of 3 guys? Yes. But this is not my match. This is Ronnie's match. But I'm just telling you my thoughts. Like Bobbitt's, last week, it wasn't emotional for me. And what happens at the end of this match still was not emotional for me. It's a great story of how 2 guys who had to fight up from the bottom get to the top. It's a great story. But I wouldn't say it's an emotional moment. And from what wasn't this one of the most emotional moments in WWE WrestleMania history? It's a moment. That's the moment that you're going to see at the end of this match is what happens at the end of it. So you tell me when you're ready to start watching this match. We'll count down from 3, and then when we hit go, we'll go.
Right, and also with that too, with the ending, and like you said, with the struggle that he did, Chris Benoit, from being on SmackDown and pushing and striving to be the best, and then being deflecting over to Raw to face who he wanted to with the challenge. It also is kind of parallel too with the Daniel Bryan, how he kind of had a fight and go up against to show that he was worthy of a match with Triple H.
Right.
And Triple H to me was always best as heel. And
well, he could play the face, but it was only the goofy face with Shawn
right.
Michaels.
Right, the DX and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, humor.
The
But him as
DX, the
heel,
DX portion, their DX run was a babyface run, even though they were heels for a little bit, but it's still a babyface run. But I liked it.
right? And then with it, I mean, just the knowing too that, with like you said, what happens at the end with the two in the ring. It's just, to me, it did kind of like give you the chills for me, and hair standing up on end, just that he accomplished this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it ended there. I mean, it did go on afterwards, a little bit as well, where he defended the title and his title reign, as champion too, which I followed, up until, I mean, with all three of them. I mean, I still follow, all three of them with stuff that comes out with reports and stuff. So it's just something that, I mean, it was, for me, it was nice to see each one that I followed. Shawn Michaels was going to be one of my favorite matches. It actually was a toss up between this match and Shawn Michaels versus Bret in the Iron Man. Mm-hmm. And those were the two that I had, and I ended up ultimately picking this one because of the three guys that I followed from day one practically.
Right.
So, but I am ready when everyone else is.
Bobbit, are you ready? Good talk.
Yes, sir.
All right. On after, I'm going to count backwards from 3, and then after I say go, press play. 3, 2, 1, go. Now, let's keep in mind here, there's a lot of people out there saying that they buried, and keep this in mind, and Ronnie made mention of it, and I do want to make this point. Everybody sits there and says that WWE buried the big old belt in WWE. This just proves everybody's point fucking wrong again, with them saying, well, they didn't think the fucking big gold belt was as important as the WWE Championship. Then why in the fuck was it the main event, and why in the fuck did they have it on the top guy in the company at the time, which was Triple H? It would never, if Vince didn't give a fuck about that fucking belt, he would never have had it main event a WrestleMania, ever. So that argument, I don't even want to fucking hear that fucking argument ever again. I mean, you have Shawn Michaels in this match. Shawn Michaels is Mr. fucking WrestleMania. Why would Shawn Michaels want to be involved in a world championship match if the world title wasn't worth a shit to WWE? So for everybody to sit there and say that this title wasn't worth anything is...
It's the most prestigious title that was ever part of the WWE.
Because if you look at it, it became the World Heavyweight Championship. It was the former NWA World Heavyweight Championship after they remade the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. The old one is what you see on what's his name? Aldis. I can't remember his first name. But that guy right there is championship material, in my opinion. But I just wanted to make that point real quick about the World Heavyweight title. Everybody sits there and says, I'm not everybody, but there's a lot of people out there that sit there and say that the world title wasn't worth anything to the WWE. Then why in the fuck are they, why is it main eventing here? And why did they have the title on Triple H? Why did they put it on John Cena if they didn't care about it? I don't understand the logic. Why did the Undertaker have another good point? Why? I don't understand the logic of people sometimes. Their logic of, well, it's not good. Well, prove to me how it's not good. It main evented a World WrestleMania, for fuck's sake. The match, the title itself was in a WrestleMania. That's all I'm saying. I don't want everybody to think that I'm... Well, I'm up to the Triple H entrance.
Yep, that's where I'm at.
Which was just a
Same here.
regular entrance. Triple H didn't start doing his over-the-top fucking entrances until like a few years ago, if I remember correctly. He always did this. It's just his regular entrance.
I know you wouldn't.
Because his over-the-top
Chris
entrance.
Benoit in the ring for y'all too?
What?
Is Chris Benoit in the ring for y'all too?
Yeah, I'm up to the Triple H entrance.
Triple H, yeah.
I didn't even see the Chris Benoit entrance.
Well, it's just his music, and he entered. It's
No,
quick.
they didn't even show it.
Yeah, they did.
On the DVD, they might not have.
On the DVD, they might not have, yeah.
See, and that's the other thing, too. I mean, we may not have ever seen this match ever again because of them removing part of this history.
I honestly don't think they would. I don't think they removed any of the WrestleMania stuff. Because why would you take away... Then you're taking away, especially... You're taking away a history of the other wrestler, too. So I don't understand why WWE... That's why WWE didn't put it back in there because of anything... Of Chris Benoit's sister or whatever. They put it back in there because it's history. It's their history. They were ultimately going to...
The longest time, though, like when they would mention Royal Rumble winners, 2004 was kind of glossed over or just not even included.
Well, I mean, goddamn, all of them are glossed over. I mean, who's the first Royal Rumble winner? Does anybody even know that? That's like a trivia question.
I know it.
No clue.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan won the very first Royal Rumble.
I knew that.
I mean, who won it in 2002?
Triple H?
No, he won it in 2003, I think, didn't he? But my point is that you have to sometimes you have to do the research sometimes. They're going to gloss over certain things, but I'm going to be honest with you. Chris Benoit's title run wasn't that great. It was okay. So ultimately, they were just trying to tell a story about Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero.
Right, and even with the storylines too, because you had the one on Raw, you had the one on SmackDown, and then of course you had the beginnings of with that, like I said, that loophole where you could challenge for any title, and a lot of that, I guess, with the history, but it's just like some of the stuff when I was researching it, it was kind of like the silhouette. It wasn't like you would see like Shawn Michaels or you would see Triple H in some of the clips, but you would just see the silhouette of Chris Benoit.
Right. Well, 2003 was Lesnar. See what I mean? See my point? People are going to forget. They're not going to remember everything.
Yeah.
So I think by them just glossing over it, you can't take away that he's a Royal Rumble winner because that makes no sense.
You can't take away he's multi-time world champion.
You can't do it. I mean, you're talking if you're going to erase Chris Benoit's, you're going to erase a WrestleMania moment. You're going to erase a WrestleMania match that main evented. You're ultimately going to erase Raws and SmackDowns because he was on them. You might as well just erase those. Take him out of the picture. How much would SmackDown make sense if he's not involved in there? It makes no sense.
Might as well erase Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko coming and Perry Saturn coming from WCW.
I ultimately think WWE realized that they had made a mistake by not keeping his stuff in there and put it back in.
And they also realized it was more a medical condition about what happened rather than him making a choice.
Yeah. And if you realize about the time that they put all of his stuff back in, that determination was made.
It does not excuse what he did. It was still a despicable act. However, he was not himself when he did it.
But we can talk about that another day, even though we talked about it already last year about this time almost.
Yeah.
When I went down to see Drew and gave him a cookie sheet. But anyway, I don't remember. That's like we're right there. I mean, when was I supposed to come out? When did we go on vacation? Isn't it like the 15th through the 20th or something like that? I have to look.
It was the 20th because I was supposed to be in the bowling tournament. April 20th.
Okay. That was the 18th, 19th,
You were
20th.
supposed to come up to me.
Yeah.
But I came out here in February instead.
Yep. 18th. Well, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th. Because it was 5 days. I remember that. But anyway. Oh, there we go. Wendy's first thunderstorm.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
We just had thunder crackling.
I was going to say I heard something in the background.
Right. But if you look, they kind of had to tell the story of Triple H and Shawn Michaels here. They all got their shots in. There's a lot of one-on-ones. Nope, here comes Benoit doing his Ian.
Right. And I mean, too, I mean, this is also, I mean, Triple H and Shawn Michaels were in their prime and doing the high spot like Shawn Michaels was doing. And Chris Benoit did them all the time, too, from coming off the top rope. But just like you said, you have the one-on-ones with them, and then you didn't have where Chris Benoit and Triple H had passed in the ring, but you didn't have it that much with Benoit and Shawn Michaels, who had never faced each other. And then, of course, you still had the animosity between Triple H and Shawn Michaels, stemming from that last man standing and that feud continuing on into this, just like putting him in the match just to appease that angle and close that storyline as well.
Correct.
And that to me, that's the kind of like storyline stuff that back in that time frame and that earlier era, how these storylines came together, where they used Raw and SmackDown talent, and then in like Triple H's case, the use of all the Evolution guys. They were all part of it in some little way. And then, of course, they had the GMs back there, so they played their part. But it kind of all fit together. And
well, if you noticed on Tuesday what they did, it's kind of what Ronnie is talking about. Because you got to remember the shakeups. They're teasing shit. Now that doesn't mean that and just giving a little announcement as we're watching, we're kind of in a lull in the match where they're just fighting. I mean, we'll talk about the match, but we'll talk about it at the end of the show. We're gonna make an announcement at the end of the show. For when are you doing that show? Friday night. Friday night. So, and that'll be after a little bit later on in the evening.
Could do it at the end of the show. Make it easier.
Huh?
Do it at the end of the show. Make it easier.
That's what I'm doing.
What you doing, baby?
Oh, here comes Chris Benoit doing his suplexes. Now, they were teasing throughout this match. If you're paying any attention to it, they were teasing his crippler crossface throughout this match. Whether or not he could get it in on either one of these guys.
The other thing I thought was funny too, watching back the old Raws, was all the signages and stuff that you would see in the audience that you don't see as much today.
Yep.
And then just some of them were hilarious that I was looking at. The one that caught my eye was just Triple H stole my hot dog. The guy's right there in the front.
Right.
With this big green sign.
Right. The reason that I think ultimately the reason they stopped doing that is because people were wanting to see what was going on inside the ring, but everybody had a damn sign and you couldn't see
Yep.
over the signs.
That was, I mean, they showed the camera. I mean, it was just like almost everybody in the audience had a sign.
Yep.
And then the other thing I picked up on too was we have that green shirt guy that we always see. There was actually a green shirt guy, but he wore a do-rag. And he was at 2 or 3 of the Raw episodes that I watched, right in the front and always in the same spot. And it was just like, that is parallel to what we're seeing today.
Right.
The guy was older, and it just, I guess he, being the fan that he was, he just happened to be right there.
Yep.
But even too, I noticed with the shows, the crowds were into it a lot more too.
Right.
When they would make an announcement or they would do a promo or when Stone Cold would come out, the crowd was so loud and so behind everything they were saying, opposed to what we're getting today as well when an announcement's made, or you get something loud like at the end of Monday Night Raw when the bar came out. It was where you really saw the crowd react, and it just seemed they reacted so much more back then during the Raw SmackDown segments and the matches.
Right. See, here's they're doing it again. They're teasing as to whether or not he can get the crippler crossface in, which he gets it in. But Shawn Michaels breaks it up, and that's the beauty of a triple threat match. It makes for a long match, but it also makes it exciting if somebody gets a finisher on somebody and they break it up. But again, I'm not a real big fan of the multi-person matches because it kind of takes away from the match itself. It becomes about the triple threat rather than the people in the match. But this was very well done triple threat match.
And I always thought with Benoit, he was always a little powerhouse.
He was. I mean, he was very technical, and he's the kind of wrestling that I liked. Technical wrestler could do, but he could pack a punch.
Yes.
And he ultimately, it's because he wrestled. He learned in the Heart Dungeon, the Heart,
Mm-hmm.
So he was ultimately that guy that could do it. They didn't just teach you one specific style of wrestling. So he combined the two. I liked his style of wrestling. He could have gone either way. He could have brawled with you. He could have been he could have technically wrestled the shit out of you. I mean, Triple H, kind of the same thing. He was more of a powerhouse than anything. Shawn Michaels, he could kind of do the same thing, but he was a lot more finesse than he was anything. I wouldn't say Shawn Michaels was a high flyer or a high spot guy. He was a high spot guy. He wasn't a high flyer. He had his elbow drop. He did his super kick. He would do the certain things, but I wouldn't so much sit here and say he's Rey Mysterio who fucking flips and flops all over the fucking ring, if that makes sense. Can you agree with that? Or would that be outside of... Is that what you mean? Is that he was Rey Mysterio kind of guy?
I guess with how there were times like he could go to the top and pull off the high spot, but more so with him in the ring, with Benoit, it was more he could do the high spot, he could do the in-ring technical, he could grapple you, he could take you to the mat. Triple H, like you said, to me, he was the powerhouse. He didn't really do that. But Shawn Michaels some matches, he was always in the ring. He would do one or two of the high spots, or there were times he would do more of the high spots than in the ring. And I guess it was whoever he was paired against is how he tailored it.
Well, that's what made Shawn Michaels who he was. He wasn't all about the high spots.
Right.
He could do the high spots, but he wasn't all about the high spots. If it called for it, he was doing it.
Right. And that's what I mean. It's just whatever was happening in the match or whoever he was facing, it's somehow the chemistry just worked with when he did those moves or those spots. It didn't always pan out, but
Shawn Michaels is busted wide open right now. Triple H is stopping him from tapping. And everybody thought everybody would think, oh my God, Triple H is helping him. No, he was keeping him from tapping out so he didn't lose the title. I think they all bleed in this match, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Except for Benoit. Benoit really doesn't bleed in this match, I don't think. He stays pretty clean. I mean, he gets blood on him, but I think he stays pretty clean. He might have had a little cut above his eye or whatever, but I don't think yeah, he's got a cut right below his eye. But I don't think he actually, bled too much. I think Triple H does, though. I know Shawn Michaels, he's bleeding already.
Oh, yeah. Well, even that last man standing match, because I actually did go back and watch the Rumble just to watch him from 1 to 30. But that last man standing match, it was just like, and then when he came out the night after and they were all bandaged up and Shawn Michaels' eye was all puffed out, it was just like for 22 minutes for them to brutalize each other like that.
Yep. Yeah, I was just going to make mention of that. Actually looked that up. This WrestleMania, everybody complains about the length of WrestleMania. This WrestleMania, including the pre-show, which happened on, I think they did a kickoff show, which I think was an hour, did not include, was 4 hours, 30 minutes. But if you go and look at the matches, they had 1, 2, 3, 12 matches. But 6 hours for a show is very long, and I will say that for a main roster show, when people are sitting there saying it's going to be a 7.5-hour show, you're talking about the whole damn thing. They're talking about the kickoff show and all that. I watched maybe the first half. Well, actually, we watched the whole thing, but we didn't stream it. We only streamed the half hour of the kickoff show because coming on a half hour before, talking about what we're talking about. But so yeah. I think Triple H becomes a bloody mess because of Shawn Michaels. I don't remember correctly.
Yeah, Shawn Michaels was more the Ric Flair type with the way the blood, and when Jimmy Snuka would bleed, it just for them, it just made it look like it was much worse than what it ended up being, like a minor or major cut. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just the way, I guess, the blood was flowing. And even with like that Stone Cold match we watched where he was bleeding over his head and down his face, it's just, I mean, you got the sweat, you're hot, you're sweaty. It just intensifies it.
Right.
And that's the thing too with the storylines. I mean, you had the little bit with Benoit mixing it up, and then now you're going back to these two again. Like you said, it's just the singles, and then you had some of the three.
But you had the mix-ins when they just put Benoit through the table.
Right.
fucking JR's going, we need an EMT out here for Benoit.
Meanwhile, Shawn Michaels walks past him with a fucking blood red face.
Blood's running all down fucking Shawn Michaels. He's got it all over him. He's fucking bleeding out like a stuck pig. And they're like, Benoit needs medical attention. It's like, oh, there, Triple H is cut open. Whoever doesn't bleed out first wins this match. Shawn Michaels just hit the pedigree, but this I can buy with the with Shawn Michaels kicking out of it. If I don't know if there's a cover here, it's because it took him forever to get to him. He's able to recover.
Even better.
And Earl Hebner fucking counts really slow when it gets close to the end of a match. Whether or not Hebner takes a fucking bump, he fucking.
He might. There's time.
I don't know. I don't think he does take a bump in this one. Well, he might. I mean, it's Earl Hebner. It is a WrestleMania main event, so he might take a bump. You always did. I fucking like the way Triple H is like, I'm bleeding all over the place. I'm just spitting blood. He's like. We're almost to the end. You can tell because of the. And then the anticipation is killed by a Shawn Michaels sweet chin music. And if you can hear the crowd, they wanted Benoit to win this match.
Yeah, like I said before, that to me was the kind of like the parallel with Daniel Bryan, with him going over that night.
This match, they could have told this story with Becky Lynch, and they didn't. They failed. Counters the pedigree into the crippler crossface. I don't remember correctly if he actually tapped. No, he does not tap out. Well, not yet. Or he doesn't pass out. Excuse me. Oh.
Gary's out.
Yeah, he's getting ready to right now. And there it is. He tapped out. So the story of the match was whether or not he could
actually tap out anywhere.
he could tap out, or if he could even compete with these two guys. That was ultimately the story that they were telling.
Right. And it was basically like to prove everyone wrong that he could do the impossible and win.
Well, I don't think it was impossible for him to win. I think it was more or less whether or not he was worthy to compete with Triple H or Shawn Michaels. So, I mean, ultimately, yeah, you could say that and add to it, but I think he could have. He was world champion material. It's just
The timing of it had to be right.
And here's that moment that I'm talking about.
Right.
Because Eddie Guerrero, who did Eddie Guerrero wrestle that night?
Um, yeah, Kurt Angle.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Eddie's match and this match were the two longest matches of the night. For the
And they treated the World Championship matches like they meant something.
Mm-hmm.
Like Kofi Kingston's match meant more to me than the women's match did. It would have made more. It would have. The match would have meant more to me if they didn't fuck up like they did at the end. I think, if that makes sense. But this match was good. Again, I'm not a fan of triple threats, but I did like, and they stayed away from the triple threat. The thing about this match is they did have the moments where the three of them were in the ring at the same time, but they didn't thrive on it. It's not the only reason that the match itself was about one-on-ones. And ultimately, could Chris Benoit be able to compete with these guys? That was the moment, and that was how they told the story.
No, that was my thing.
Right. And even afterwards, there was a continuality of the storyline, but it was just now reversed where Chris Benoit was holding the championship and Eric Bischoff had promised Shawn a championship match.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the draft came into play where Triple H ended up going to SmackDown.
Right.
And right away, he was put back into Raw, and it ended up being a triple threat at Backlash again. And then they also in Alberta, Canada, had a match as well, so that Benoit in his hometown.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like it just stopped storyline at that point in time and they went on. It did go into 2 additional events to kind of finalize everything because he did retain, and Shawn Michaels got his actual rematch that he was promised, and then of course Triple H being bounced between SmackDown and Raw.
Right. Yep.
So I mean, the storylines to me, like we're getting now with actually, I mean, it's not believable that she's now going to face Lacey Evans after everything that went on. That was finalized.
Keep talking.
I was going to say Wendy didn't agree with me, but I mean, overall for me, like I said, these were 3 guys from day one. I felt separately, and just a matter of seeing them in this match. What happened at the end of the match with Benoit,
Mm-hmm.
and just even with Shawn Michaels and Triple H. I mean, because they continued their feuds, and then they're together. Then they're like a girlfriend-boyfriend situation. They were
right.
just inseparable, and they always had chemistry. But I did think for Benoit and Shawn Michaels never facing each other before, you had Michaels and Triple H who had, and then Triple H theirs. I mean, I do think it kind of flowed with how they did it within the match with the singles, and then all 3 of them, and then the culmination of Benoit having Triple H tap out.
Is there anything else? You got any it's yours. You got any final thoughts on it?
Unless anybody else had anything to say, or
Bobbit? Bobbit! All right.
We bored.
What?
I said we bored him.
I guess. I don't know. Well, I mean, I would say if we're gonna talk about matches, it was a decent match. I don't know if I would. Again, I'm not a fan of multi-person matches. So
It was a good match.
well, there you are. Well, fucking, do you have anything else you'd like to add besides it was a good match?
Depends. What are we talking about now?
Oh my God! I said, you got any final thoughts on what you just seen?
Oh, yeah. Good match, and it's going to live on forever in our memories.
Oh yeah. That's it? That's all you're gonna say about it? The fuck? Is there any questions out there that for Ronnie? Is there anybody in the chat that had any questions?
Yeah, I was trying to follow along to see if anybody had anything.
I didn't see anything, but
yeah, me neither.
Oh yeah, the Raw after this, yeah, the Triple H tapped out. Yeah, I remember that. I remember watching that. Triple H tapped out.
Yeah, because he had a separated shoulder too from that match.
Yeah. And I didn't come from Chris Benoit. It actually came from earlier in the match, if I do believe, with Shawn Michaels, when they had if I remember correctly, it might have happened before he started bleeding.
Yeah, I thought it was around the table spot.
It could have been. It could have been. It was right around that time when he hurt himself. But that being said, if nobody has anything, we can end it here. I enjoy these because the reason I'm doing this is kind of a thank you to my staff or my people that come on here, and I do this for them. This is for them. This is not for me. It's not for my enjoyment. This is for them. These are their favorite matches. If somebody's favorite match was goddamn fucking Mick Foley versus the fucking Undertaker in a thumbtack match, so be it. It's their match. It's not mine. But other than that, I don't have anything to add. I know Trek got here late. He probably didn't even watch the match. Is there anything you remember from the match, Trek?
I just remember them bleeding their asses off, and I mean,
Yes.
it was over a year in the making, because when he was at the Royal Rumble the year before, I mean, he got the standing ovation when he had the match with Kurt Angle. It all seemed to begin there for me, because after that it was just nonstop, hyping up what was to come. And then to see that final match, we didn't get to see it because they took it out, but to see him hugging his wife and his son, I mean, that was just the culmination of everything this guy's put his ass through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a machine.
Yeah.
He was that damn good. He deserved it.
Yeah. What are we doing in 2 weeks? We are doing Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Bret Hart WrestleMania 13. And I have not watched the Raws leading up to that, but I am for sure going to. In fact, I probably will watch when we get to the point where I might want to do a Raw or whatever. I might do something like that where I'm watching the few. We'll see what happens, but. So it's Shawn Michaels. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Bret Hart WrestleMania 13 in 2 weeks. Next week I'm taking the entire week off, even from This Week in Wrestling, just because usually we take a week break from WrestleMania time because you get burnt out. I mean, think about it. We did 6.5 hours of WrestleMania. We did TakeOver this year. We did This Week in Wrestling Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We didn't do anything Saturday, did we? No.
We watched G1, but that was
yeah, but we didn't stream it. We just watched it. Believe it or not, I'm gonna tell you guys, for what we do, there's more that goes into this than just us getting behind a computer and shooting this out to you guys. There's a lot that goes behind it. Sometimes, yes, I'm doing what I love, but sometimes I need to take a break from doing it, and usually after WrestleMania week is the time that I do. So that's why we're taking a week off. We will be back the following Monday for Raw. We'll be watching. It's just we won't be doing the show. So, but other than that, for tomorrow night, Heather will be on Tattooed Mistress on Raging Ink. She's doing her show, but it's not going to be a normal Raging Ink show. They are going to go over the what? They're going to do shake-up predictions, and there is a special guest that some of you may know that she's going to have. It was ultimately her idea, and I'm not going to give away who that is, but it's not Ronnie. She's going to be there. She's going to be there. I'll be there. Whoever. It's not just an all women's thing. Dory, shit, I gave it away.
Great job, JP.
Sorry, but she's going to be Heather's special guest, and if you don't know her, you will learn to love her. She's very knowledgeable. She's like Gina. They're like two peas in a pod. So if you like Gina, you'll like her. So they're gonna do that tomorrow night. It'll be fun because we're gonna give your predictions, and I'll shit all over them, all of them, because that's what I do.
Yeah.
I won't try to. I mean, we'll see what they say. I see some of the stuff that they have. I kind of agree with some of it, but we'll see. But that being said,
Bullshit. Oh, sorry.
that's not true, Bobbin.
Allergies.
That's not true. But we'll see what happens. That being said, I will end the show here. You guys have a great night, and we will see you tomorrow night as well for BCW too. And This Week in Wrestling. We are doing that. We're gonna do it. We're gonna run through the news real quick, and then I might have a special guest at that. I'm not gonna give that one away. I might have a special guest, or we might. So that being said, I'm gonna end it here. You guys have a great night, and we will talk to you tomorrow.